Air travel is, for many, something pleasurable. For others, somewhat uncomfortable. And for some, downright tedious. But fortunately or not, it's still the fastest alternative for reaching another state or continent. Even short trips of 2 to 3 hours can cause some discomfort to passengers, especially for those who fly, like me, in economy class. Cramped seats that barely recline transform the pleasure of flying into a far from pleasant experience, especially when we're talking about flights of 12 hours or more. And it's precisely on these longer journeys that one of the most terrifying problems arises: deep vein thrombosis. This condition can affect even healthy people who remain seated for extended periods. This isn't alarmism. Medical studies prove that the risk increases significantly after 7 to 8 hours of flight. The danger lies in the fatal combination of factors that converge inside the cabin. The explanation is simpler than it seems. When we remain seated, especially in the restrictive positions typical of airplane seats, the blood in the deep veins of our legs needs to work against gravity to return to the heart. This flow, already naturally challenging, becomes even more compromised by dehydration caused by the extremely dry cabin air, reduced pressure, and forced immobility. The result? An environment conducive to blood clots forming in the deep veins, mainly in the legs. But if you thought flights of 7 to 14 hours were already challenging, prepare yourself for what's coming. Qantas, one of Australia's largest airlines, has decided to go further, keeping 238 people confined in an aluminum tube for more than 21 uninterrupted hours. That's right, almost a full day in the air without stops. Faced with this extreme scenario, inevitable questions arise. Is it worth it for Qantas and passengers to take this risk on such long flights? What we've discovered about this ambitious initiative could completely change the way we travel. But the big question remains: what's the real agonizing rush through connection airports? It sounds simple, but this journey hides one of the most complex challenges in commercial aviation and the human body. When Qantas announced Project Sunrise, the proposal sounded simultaneously ambitious and concerning. After all, we're talking about flights that can exceed 22 hours in duration, connecting Sydney directly to London and New York without a single stop. To understand the magnitude of this project, we first need to understand what happens to our bodies when we sit in the rarefied air of a pressurized cabin for such an extended period. The Lawnflit study specifically investigated flights with an average duration of 13 hours and brought concerning numbers. Approximately 2.8% of passengers considered high risk developed deep vein thrombosis during or shortly after these trips. Now, imagine extrapolating this scenario to flights of 20 to 22 hours, almost double the duration. The mathematics of health isn't linear. The risk doesn't just increase proportionately, it multiplies in ways not yet completely understood by medical science. But the challenges don't stop at blood circulation. There's an entire cascade of effects on the body. Severe dehydration due to the extremely low cabin humidity, generally between 10 and 20%, while healthy environments are between 40 and 70%. Circadian fatigue caused by crossing multiple time zones. Reduced atmospheric pressure equivalent to being at 7,900 feet or 2,400 meters altitude, and prolonged exposure to cosmic radiation, which is significantly higher on long-duration flights. It's precisely on this delicate terrain that Qantas decides to build its future. Project Sunrise represents an order of 12 specially modified Airbus A350 1000 aircraft, each costing about $330 million. We're talking about approximately $4 billion in a single project, a bold bet that could change intercontinental air transport or become one of modern aviation's biggest commercial mistakes. The vision is seductive. Direct flights from Sydney and Melbourne to New York and London, all exceeding 10,000 nautical miles, 11,500 miles, 18,500 kilometers, and potentially taking more than 20 hours. It's about eliminating stopovers that frequently add 4 to 6 hours to total travel time, reducing the risk of lost baggage, missed connections, and the physical and mental wear of changing aircraft in the middle of an already exhausting journey. But why now? Why does current technology finally allow what was impossible just a decade ago? The answer lies in a fascinating combination of advances in composite materials, efficiency of next-generation turbofan engines, and, crucially, a much more sophisticated understanding of aerodynamics and weight management. The Project Sunrise A350-1000 will have only 238 seats, the lowest seat density of any A350-1000 in operation worldwide. Compare this with typical configurations ranging between 350 and 410 seats on the same aircraft model, and you begin to understand the radical mathematics behind this project. The distribution is strategically calculated: 6 seats in first class, 52 in business class, 40 in premium economy, and 140 in economy. This means an impressive 41% of seats are premium, first, business, and premium economy combined. It's a complete inversion of traditional commercial aviation logic, which historically maximized economy seats to increase revenue per flight. This reduced configuration isn't corporate generosity. It's pure physical necessity. Each removed seat represents saved weight, not just the weight of the seat itself, but the weight of passengers, their baggage, the food and water needed to feed them, the individual entertainment system, everything. Each aircraft will include areas dedicated to passenger well-being, with stretching and movement zones, a direct acknowledgement of health risks associated with prolonged immobility. There will also be customized circadian lighting, designed to help the human body gradually adapt to new time zones, and improved humidification systems to combat the typical dehydration of long flights.
But the real revolution is hidden where passengers can't see, in the fuel tanks and structural modifications that make these flights possible. And this is where the story gets really interesting, because the path to the A350-1000 is paved with the failures and limitations of other aircraft that tried and failed to conquer these impossible routes. When aeronautical engineers talk about range, they're essentially discussing a brutal equation: how much fuel you can carry versus how much total weight the aircraft can lift and keep flying efficiently. The modified Airbus A350-1000 solves this equation in a way no other commercial aircraft currently can. The standard A350-1000's range is impressive on its own, about 8,700 nautical miles. But Sydney to London requires 10,500 nautical miles, and Sydney to New York demands about 10,000 nautical miles, so this deficit of approximately 2,000 nautical miles represents the abyss between possible and impossible in long-distance commercial aviation. The solution came through the inclusion of an extra center fuel tank, a deep structural modification that isn't simply adding one more tank. This additional center tank increases the aircraft's total fuel capacity by about 24,000 liters or 6,340 gallons, raising the maximum range beyond 10,000 nautical miles, approaching 11,500 miles. It's enough fuel to fly from Sydney to London with safety margins for weather diversions, unpredictable headwinds, and emergency reserves. But here's the crucial detail that delayed the entire project. This tank wasn't certified on the first attempt. Australian regulatory authorities required a complete redesign due to safety concerns, especially related to fuel behavior in emergency situations and structural integrity under extreme load conditions. The new design finally received certification, but this pushed aircraft deliveries to late 2026, with first commercial flights expected only in the first half of 2027. The A350-1000 also brings other technologies that make it ideal for ultra-long distances. Its fuselage is constructed with 53% advanced composite materials, mainly carbon fiber. which are simultaneously lighter and stronger than traditional aluminum. The Rolls-Royce Trent XWB engines are the most efficient in the wide-body category, consuming approximately 25% less fuel than the previous generation of similar engines. But let's go back in time. Why didn't Qantas simply use the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, an aircraft it already operates and that was designed specifically for long-distance flights? The answer lies in the double sunrise test flights conducted in 2019, which revealed brutal limitations that only appear when you try to push an aircraft beyond its design limits. In November 2019, Qantas completed a historic test flight from London to Sydney using a Boeing 789 Dreamliner carrying only 50 passengers and landing with remaining fuel for approximately another hour and 45 minutes of flight. It sounds impressive until you analyze the numbers more carefully. 50 passengers on an aircraft that normally transports between 242 and 290 people. This isn't a commercial flight, it's a demonstration flight. The payload, passengers and baggage, represents only 17% of normal capacity. Practically all checked baggage was eliminated, the amount of food and water on board was minimized, and even the number of cabin crew was reduced to the regulatory minimum. And even with all these dramatic weight reductions, the aircraft landed with tight fuel margins. In actual commercial operation, you need much larger margins to accommodate unexpected headwinds, diversions due to adverse weather conditions, possible destination airport closures requiring alternatives, and all the other unpredictable variables that are part of daily commercial aviation. The 787-9 has a published maximum range of about 7,635 nautical miles. Impressive, but still about 2,500 to 3,000 nautical miles, depending on the specific configuration, short of what's needed to operate Sydney-London commercially with full payload and adequate safety margins. Even the 780-10, the longest variant, sacrifices range in favor of passenger capacity, staying at about 6,430 nautical miles, or 7,400 miles.
Airbus also tried its solution, the A350-900 ULR, ultra-long range, which Singapore Airlines uses to operate the world's current longest commercial route, Singapore-New York, at 9,537 nautical miles, or 10,975 miles, or 17,670 kilometers. But even this specialized aircraft doesn't have enough range for Sydney-London, and its configuration of only 161 seats, 94 business, 67 premium economy, 0 economy, makes the route's economics even more challenging than Project Sunrise's already premium configuration. The delivery of Project Sunrise aircraft has been strategically rescheduled. The first A350-1000 ultra-long-range aircraft is expected to be delivered in late 2026, with Project Sunrise flights beginning sometime in 2027 or 2028. Each aircraft needs to undergo extensive flight testing, certifications from multiple regulatory authorities, not just Australian but also UK and US authorities, since the aircraft will operate in those countries, pilot and crew training, and development of specific operational procedures for ultra-long flights. Qantas also needed to negotiate new agreements with its pilots, including special protocols to manage fatigue on flights exceeding 20 hours. This may include requirements for larger crews, mandatory rest periods in dedicated rest areas, and possibly limitations on how many ultra-long flights a pilot can operate within a specific period. The economics of Project Sunrise are simultaneously bold and fragile. With 238 seats and a 41% premium mix, Qantas is betting it can attract passengers willing to pay substantially more for the privilege of flying direct. On similar long-distance routes currently operated by Qantas, average prices vary approximately as follows. First class can cost between 15,000 and 25,000 Australian dollars per round-trip ticket. Business class ranges between 8,000 and 12,000 dollars. Premium economy is between 4,000 and 6,000 dollars, and traditional economy varies between 1,800 and 3,500 dollars, depending on the time of year and purchase advance. Let's do the rough math. If Qantas can fill the aircraft with typical occupancy rates, assuming 85% in premium and 90% in economy. Revenue per flight could reach approximately 1.8 to 2.2 million Australian dollars. For a traditional aircraft operating the same route with stopovers and more seats, revenue would be higher in absolute numbers, but operational cost would also be significantly higher due to the additional stopover. The operational cost of such a flight is astronomical. Fuel alone can cost between $400,000 and $500,000 depending on current prices. Landing and navigation fees in multiple countries, aircraft depreciation, maintenance, crew, premium catering, and all other fixed and variable costs. Profit margin will depend critically on maintaining high occupancy rates in premium classes. If business class drops below 70% occupancy, the entire financial model begins to crumble. That's why this configuration of only 238 seats with 41% premium is simultaneously the project's greatest strength and greatest vulnerability. Beyond all this, can the human body really tolerate 20 hours confined without serious medical consequences? And can Qantas maintain the economic viability of this operation over decades? The answer to these questions will only come when the first aircraft begin operating commercially in 2027. Until then, Project Sunrise remains one of modern aviation's most ambitious and risky projects. Because in the end, we're not just talking about flying farther. We're talking about challenging the very nature of distance, time, and human limits. And that, regardless of the outcome, is a story worth following.